Hey everybody, it is Lisa Nearing from True North Homeschool Academy, and I'm going to talk to you just really briefly about classical education. This is just a quick overview about what classical education is. We just did a free masterclass on classical education, and I know a lot of you weren't able to be there during the time, so we'll hopefully be able to send this out to you and give you a quick overview of what classical ed is. Many of you might be familiar with Dorothy Sayers' essay, The Lost Tools of Learning. I personally am a huge fan of Dorothy Sayers, not necessarily for that essay, though I love it, but her mystery books with Lord Pete are super phenomenal. So go check them out. But there's so much more to the classical education model. That's a great intro. And I think a lot of people, there's really some controversy about that essay because a lot of people are just saying that, it's being used in a way that Dorothy Sayers might not have necessarily wanted it to be used. And I don't know about that because, Dorothy has been gone for a while, but I think she was a great thinker and she was an educator. So she had lots of great thoughts about education. And I think it's really worth, taking a look at that essay because she was a great writer and really knew some stuff. But there's a lot to classical education. And again, we're going to just do a brief overview tonight about what it is. So 3 things that are kind of the hallmarks of classical education are that it is 1, skill-based learning. Number 2, it talks about the interrelatedness or connectedness of all subjects. So I think that's one of the ways that it is very, very different from modern education is that there is an interrelatedness and connectedness to all subjects as you're learning with classical education. And then thirdly is the recognition of the value of men, that we are made in the image of God for a specific purpose. And that, of course, is profoundly different than a regular secular education might be. So there's other attributes of classical Christian education model, but these 3 really provide the backbone to it. Of course, we'll go into a little bit more, but again, they are 1, it is skill-based learning, 2, the interrelatedness or connectedness of all the subjects, and 3, the recognition of the value of man and man, woman, child, all who are made in the image of God for a specific purpose. So 2 guiding principles of classical education, you might have heard these Latin phrases before. One is, I hope I don't butcher them, memoriae mater studiorum. Memory is the mother of learning. And secondly, multum non multa. Less is more. You don't need so much. You just need enough. And I love memoriae mater studiorum because I do really believe that memory is the mother of learning. My husband's a clinical psychologist, and we talk about learning all the time in our home, actually. And his point is that to learn something means to memorize it. If you have memory issues, short-term or long-term, you probably really struggle with memory. And that is one of the, when I get phone calls from families who have learning disabilities or don't know that they do, and they talk to me about memory issues, that's a question I usually pose. Because most of us have the ability to memorize. And to memorize something is to own it, which means we have learned it. So with classical education, one of the things I love about it is that students learn how to learn. That is not necessarily the case with other types of education. In secular education, you hear this all the time. Well, hey, we can Google it. We don't have to memorize it. And if you have something memorized it, you own that information. So it's an important piece of education, whether you're going to educate classically or not. So again, I love the fact that students learn how to learn with classical education. With kids who have been taught with a classical education, they usually know what they know at the end of it. We did great books and we did a literature-based studies for years in our homeschool. We homeschooled for 30 years. We have this broad timeline to draw from of how homeschooling worked in our life. And when we were doing a literature-based program, we went through like literally tens and maybe even hundreds of books. We're big readers, we're fast readers, we read a lot out loud. But at the end, we weren't really sure. Maybe like I'd ask the kids, so when did that happen? Who were the main players? Where did this take place? And it was kind of like, throwing the dice on the table. They might know, they might not. But with classical education, when you memorize specific things, when you add timelines in, when you do the 5 common topics, at the end of the day, you know what you know. And I love that because if you're going to put all this time and effort into learning, you might as well know something at the end of it, right? The other thing I love about classical education is that You usually use a variety of neural pathways to learn the memory work because memorizing something is usually hard work. Some of us are natural memorizers. I'm not a natural memorizer. And so you have to learn the tools and tricks that work for you to really learn to really know how to memorize well. And usually that can include like copy work or saying it over and over or jumping, adding some kind of like ASL or jumping while you're doing it, some kind of physical cue, chewing the same flavor gum that you're using when you're memorizing it is when you need to pull that memory work out of your brain. There's all sorts of mnemonics and tips and tricks that you can use to really learn. And because you're doing those things, you're using many different neural pathways and you're teaching your brain how to retain. You're also building executive functioning skills. You're, again, learning how to learn. I love that. So different mnemonics and ways that you can learn: memory work, by copy work, observation and record keeping, the scientific method, integrating subject matter, i.e. context, and then utilizing the 5 common topics. I personally love the 5 common topics. You can find our little ebook on the 5 common topics in our shop. And the 5 common topics, you always start with definition, you move on to relationship. How does this relate to other things? Compare and contrast. How is this the same or different compared to other things? Authority. What is the thing or the person or the authority behind how we determine if this is logical, valid, or true? And this is a really important piece of knowing logic and thinking and writing well as authority. What authority is one appealing to? And then circumstances. What time and place does this take place in and around and about and behind and before and all those kind of great things? So the 5 common topics is a really important tool. I also really like the 5 canons of rhetoric, and that is invention, arrangement, elocution, memory, and delivery. And if you hear a great rhetorician or somebody who is a really good public speaker, they have invented the speech generally, unless they have a speechwriter. They figured out what arrangement it goes to, how to deliver it. Oftentimes, if they're really a great speaker, they have it memorized. And then what does the delivery look like? So those are the 5 canons of rhetoric. And again, these are all tools that you learn as a classical memory student and teacher. And so you've probably also heard of the Trivium, or the 3 ways. There is the Trivium in classical education as well as the Quadrivium. And these are developmental as well as incremental stages of learning. So these skills are collectively referred to, I don't want to say skills. These stages for really K through 12 are considered the Trivium, and it's a Latin word meaning 3 ways. Tri means 3, via means road or way. And then as you move on into college level work, that's called the Quadrivium, and that means 4 ways, and it's math, geometry, arithmetic, and astronomy. But the Trivium are 3 stages of learning and development, each with its own tools. There is the grammar stage, the dialectic, and the rhetoric stage. And again, these stages are developmental as well as how we learn new things, regardless of our age. So if I was going to learn a new skill, I would probably start at the grammar stage, even though I'm well over, 18, where you would think like the grammar stage is really honestly not 12th grade. The grammar stage is really like from birth till developmentally around age 11. But again, if you're learning a new skill or something, you're going to probably start at the grammar stage. And what does the grammar stage include? It includes learning vocabulary, understanding facts about that subject matter, principles of any subject in the world around them in a rote fashion is part of the grammar stage, understanding that grows with familiarity and interaction with the materials. And then students in this stage learn best by really truly exploring, experiencing, observing, and repetition, memorization, and honestly, dramatization. So this is a great stage in development to really like get outside in nature and take your little nature book and your nature journal and observe, make records of what you've seen out on your nature walk. Draw a picture, memorize the Latin name and the common name, all those kind of things. But also when we're learning a new skill, if I decided for any reason that I would want to become a mechanic, the first thing I'm going to want to do is memorize the parts of an engine, right? And then I'm going to want to understand what all those parts do, understanding facts about them, how they work together, all that kind of thing. So again, it's a developmental stage that goes from about birth to age 11. It's the grammar stage. And this is where kids are learning the vocabulary definition. They have just like an innate ability to memorize. You don't have to teach them to memorize necessarily, because look, with kids this age, a lot of things are new. If they're young enough, everything is new. So really, they're coming at the world kind of like a blank slate, and they have to memorize things. They have to understand what it is, so that when they go back to it, they know what to expect and how to interact with it. So kids are naturally good at memorization at this age. And so take advantage of it. That's one of the beauties of a program like Cross 7 based on the Claritas memory program. It's a great spine. I'm not a believer in taking memory work out of context. I think you need to do memorization. It gives your kids' brains hooks to hang other things on, but then do reading, do field trips, do cooking together, look at the car engine together, do all those things, contextualize and live life together. Okay, so that's the grammar stage. The dialectic or logic stage really lasts between like age 11 to 14. These are the tween years. These are when your kids get a little, like they might have been taking out the trash their whole life, and all of a sudden they wake up one morning and go, wait, why am I taking out the trash? Why isn't Joe taking out the trash? And this is when they start questioning and arguing more. They develop a drive to understand, and they want to relate one thing to the other, and they want to understand how it all fits together within their experiences and the facts that they have and continue to collect. So this stage is really characterized as a time of questioning, i.e. arguing, challenging authority, also i.e. arguing, relying on their own thinking. They're not just going to take what you say anymore. They're going to kind of wrestle it through and go, does that make sense to me? I'm not sure that it does. Or, wow, that makes total sense. And students at this age really benefit by learning to ask good questions, by learning to reason logically, and learning to debate ideas respectfully. So whereas in the grammar stage, you really want to help your kids memorize a broad and deep knowledge, body of knowledge. In the logic or dialectic stage, you really want to help your kids understand fallacies, informal logic, and actually even logic. And if they can start to learn to develop their ability to speak publicly and to actually develop rhetorical skills with debate, that's even better. This is a great age to really do that, because here's the deal. Your kids are going to argue anyway at this stage, so give them some tools so that they can argue logically and well. If you do give them those tools, believe me, they will. But look, the deal is they're going to probably argue anyway, because kids are kids and they go through these developmental stages, right? So that's the grammar stage, where they're memorizing a lot of stuff and they're having a lot of new experiences. The dialectic or logic stage is when they really have a drive and need to understand how things relate. So again, you want to really introduce and use the 5 common topics, as well as help them understand fallacies and informal and formal logic. Then the rhetorical stage. This starts about age 14 and goes through the time that they graduate, and really even to college and young adulthood and beyond, where students are using their knowledge and skills to creatively relate information to each other in new ways. So they're taking that broad body of knowledge that they memorized in the grammar stage, how to synthesize it and put it all together and argue about it in the logic stage, and they're using it in the rhetoric stage to make connections, to understand things, to strategize, to make logical conclusions, and to make big decisions in their lives. And then this stage, they're going to learn how to delve back into the grammar and dialectic stages briefly to learn new facts as they process information. Because of course, as they synthesize information, they're going to have to go back and learn new definitions, new memory work, new argumentations to put into that. So it all just continues to build on each other. And they're going to be able to efficiently bring that information into a relationship with the other information that they know and hold, and to communicate those ideas through papers, through presentations, by talking with each other. And it really can be a beautiful thing. So I like these stages of development. I think it's a really naturally evolving way of understanding education, and it's how we learn new things all the time. I think when we're going into new situations of learning, if we can just start with definitions, we're way ahead of the game. And it's just a really simple way to teach your kids. It can save you a lot of time and a lot of money if you educate classically. So the stages and ages, the stages and tools of the Trivium function in many ways like a computer. So the grammar stage is input, The dialectic stage is processing and the rhetorical stage is output. And that is a really simplistic way of thinking about it because the human brain is not a computer. It is so much more complex and dynamic and interactive and God made, which a computer is man made. So, in some ways, not even comparable, but it's a very simplistic analogy. So once the student has the skills from these three areas, they can really spend a lifetime processing any and all information they encounter with these tools. And it gives them a really great working understanding of how to approach new learning and new situations. And it might seem like just super smart kids can deal with classical education. Like you have to be like a super memorizer to be a classical education person. And that's really not true. It's a very succinct, simple, elegant model that you can use very effectively with all types of learners and all abilities. And it can be very developmentally appropriate for different types of learning, even at different ages. So if you feel like you didn't start at the grammar stage it is at age 5 with classical education, it's fine. You can jump in at any point and still really benefit from a classical education. Now, the second point of a classical education is the integration of the world. And after planting our roots in the model of the Trivium, classical education is really focused on understanding the interrelatedness of all subjects. And I think from a Christian point of view, that's a really beautiful way of looking at the world. God is at the center and the subjects are around God, where in modern education, the student is at the center of all learning and the subjects revolve around the student. There's not really any interconnectedness and there's really not really God. And also, the sad thing is the student's at the middle of education, and that's really kind of backwards. All education emanates from God. He's the center of all creation. And so putting him in the middle of all subjects and how we learn it really takes a lot of pressure off the student because it's not all about them. It's really about a living God. We believe that heaven and earth is created by one sovereign God, and it makes sense that all subjects would be related in some way to him. Whereas in modern education, again, the student is accustomed to being the center of everything. And they're the center of this paradigm that asks them to learn math, then reading, then Bible, if they even approach that, history, and it's all disconnected. And it's really about how they respond to it and how they feel about it. And it's independent from them getting up and taking care of their dog in the morning. And so that's one of the beautiful things about classical education is that it is really related. Oh, you've got dog food. What does that have to do with history? Did dogs always eat dog food? And how does that have to do with science or so many other things? And why does God want us to have a dog in the first place? So there's this really interconnected way of thinking and approaching life. And of course, questions are always part of good education, whether it's classical or any other type, any other pedagogy. So there's a real interrelatedness and interconnectedness with classical education, and I love that. And then lastly, but certainly not least, is the value of men. And as Christians, we believe that men, of course, women, it's inclusive. We believe that we were created by God. We're made in his image, and we're made to glorify him. And the world and everything in it is brought into submission for this purpose. Whereas with modern education, it's really focused on science and not even that anymore, but really the material world and what can we get out of it, and it's very utilitarian and it doesn't really recognize the heart, mind, and soul of a person. And so that's really honestly a tragedy. Modern education considers man without meaning. We're nothing more than a primate with skills or a random chance occurrence in nature, whereas classical Christian education knows that man is made for a purpose and we can grow in wisdom and virtue in order to further fulfill our purpose, which is to know God and to make him known. So how does classical Christian education achieve that very lofty yet abstract goal? And we do that by exposure to classical literature and the study of history. In other words, the great conversation. And the great conversation is really the ongoing process of thinkers and writers referencing and refining the words of other great thinkers and writers. And we do that in order to discern truth, beauty, and goodness. So all the while we're refining our reasoning, thinking, and understanding. So a classical Christian education model utilizes the stages and skills of the Trivium And that is also, it can include the quadrivium, but usually from K through 12, we're talking about the trivium. It includes a vision for an interconnected worldview, unified by one sovereign God, creator of all things, and the knowledge that man is made in the image of God to glorify him in this world and the next. And so classical education is really about developing the whole person so that we can participate in all this world and what the next has to offer. A classical Christian education is for those who are interested in quality over quantity and timeless versus fleeting and eternity versus the present moment. And I love classical Christian education because I believe it really does see and honor the people and the students in front of us for the purpose and glory of God. I hope it's something that you consider if you're looking for books or resources about classical education. We have many good resources to share with you. You can always reach out to Angie Farrell if you're interested in more reading, or me, or put it on the True North Homeschool Academy Facebook page, and we'd love to talk about more books there. If you have any questions about classical education, I'd love to answer those for you. Again, I'm Lacey Nearing at True North Homeschool Academy. Thanks for chatting this time. We'll talk to you later.